UK Cinema History, Season 2, Episode 11, Our Man in Havana, directed by Carol Reed, and starring Sir Alec Guinness. Hello and welcome to UK Cinema History. Today we will be covering Our Man in Havana from 1959, director Carol Reed, and starring Alec Guinness. Hello, hi Bender. How are you today, my friend?
Hey, Eric. I'm excellent. Great to see you.
Don's room was running a little long. It's too bad. It was very fascinating to be able to hear from those two filmmakers. But I'll catch her. She was good enough to record it, so I can catch the rest of it on replay. Luckily,
My thoughts exactly. And I think we got the climax right before it left. So I think uh, that stuff with distributors was fascinating. But we got the end of the story before we had to go. Hey, Sila.
great to see you, Sila. I did voice message you back, but I think Clubhouse cut off what I was saying. So maybe we should try communicating on Twitter. The voice messaging here on Clubhouse doesn't seem to work very well.
Well, I agree that the messaging here with voice is a little bit tricky, but I did get your message, and I'll get back to you. Thank you. Hello, hi.
Sila is planning on just future promotion, doing a room for the director Von Trier's birthday, and so we do have that to look forward to over in his. Is that going to be? That's going to be Musicus Organicus, or that's going to be over in Aristoposian Poet there, Sila?
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Hello, hi. Hello, Mark.
Just trying to get the word out for you, bro.
Eric,
Thank you.
speaking of such things, I felt a little like going into withdrawal when Sila stopped doing Kurosawa. So I want to, if necessary, I'll keep watching on my own. But Eric, since you've seen more than I have, besides Akiru and Yojimbo and Sanjuro and Rashomon and Seven Samurai, which we didn't watch in Sila's, but I saw a long time ago. What other Kurosawas would you most recommend?
I think you have to see Ron. I think it is an absolute must watch. But to get a kind of a good sense of the entirety of his career, he did a noir called The Bad Sleep Well that I would highly recommend. If you, High Bender, were to start up a film room that was more random, as opposed to being just UK cinema history, I would join that. Just saying. Just throwing that idea out there.
I definitely appreciate that information. Sila, would you have, if it was on Sundays around maybe 1 p.m. Eastern, would you have an interest in that? Maybe?
Yes, I'm quite, I wouldn't say addicted, but I am very interested in this type of coming together for films, old and new. I think we've covered a lot of very good stuff, so I'm curious. Yes.
So
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I've been thinking about it. I'm hesitant for the time commitment. I mean, I do prepare for your room and for Sila's room, but I always have in the back of my mind, if something goes wrong and I can't prepare, I can just be someone who mostly listens. But if I'm running the room, I feel I don't have an escape clause. So, I'm just kind of trying to see what's happening with some client commitments. If I'm going to be hired for what I'm going to be hired for, I'll have a better sense in a couple weeks. I think, and then maybe I could that would help me decide. But thank you for saying that. That means a lot. That Eric and Sela, that you guys would be open to coming to that. That is information I didn't have, and that definitely factors into it. So thank you for mentioning it.
And I would be interested in just having a different curator than myself. Be able to experience maybe some films I haven't seen, or films that maybe I wouldn't normally think of rewatching, but be rewatching it in the light of doing a room, I'm going to get more out of. So for me personally, I would encourage it now, because there is a real lack of these now. It doesn't have to be like we kind of went with this book of the month type club type. It could be anything you wanted, really, because you'd be starting it from scratch. So just if the itch ever comes, and you decide to scratch it.
I appreciate that. I also would have to be honestly. I would think about branding and in a way that it would grow, or like I don't know if I could do a bunch of Kurosawa films um, unless I did like a mini series that had a beginning and an end, separate from the. I have to think about it, but again, I really appreciate you asking and floating the idea. I definitely will give it thought. Also related to that, um, any luck with Leonard? I really miss Leonard, and it's really kind of sad that we don't see him anymore.
Yeah, we probably won't see much of him until probably the middle of May. I would think. I'm not. This isn't from one-on-one conversations. It's just from following him on Twitter. But he's just involved with so much stuff right now, between school and the election that he's involved in, and I mean, the kid. On his Twitter is just well, he's 19 years old. He's got all that energy and youth and all of that stuff, and so but
Okay,
but
good to
I
know.
do I do
Just
try to
thought I'd
keep in touch
ask.
with him.
Good, yeah. Please do stay in touch, because I don't want to make him feel harassed. So otherwise, I'd reach out to him too. But I don't want to feel, especially if he's busy with politics right now. But I just, um, just so he knows that he's missed, and we really would love him to come back whenever it's comfortable for him.
And I'd like to see that the Understanding Movies room come back as well. But again, I'm not going to push anybody on their schedule. I'm not going to, like say, hey, your real life can wait. It's the internet that's important.
Well, that's a little different because running a room is more of a responsibility. So it's asking somebody to come by as a visitor is I think less of an ask. If somebody is taking a break on their room, I can understand that. It is it's a bigger burden, and also you want to be consistent about it week after week. Whereas coming to visit when you can, you don't have to be consistent about it. So I wouldn't bug anybody who has their room on hiatus about bringing their room back. They know what they're doing. But I'll hope, like you said, in mid-May, after elections are over, that maybe we can see more of Leonard again. Anyway, thank you for checking with him about it.
Oh yeah, I need as many Leonards in this room as possible. I mean, the kid has such a vast knowledge of film. But speaking of film, let's get to this one. Our Man in Havana from 1959, directed by Carol Reed, and adapted from his novel by Graham Greene. um, I don't know as much about Cuba as certain other members of this particular panel. Hint, hint. But I do know that it's about a 770-mile island, about 60 miles off our coast, and that roughly takes up the distance between Richmond, Virginia, and Miami, Florida. And I know it produces some of the best cigars in the world, which I own 23 of. I did own 24 of, but now I'm currently in honor of this film smoking the 24th, because these are the type of events you save those for. This is such a beautiful cigar. There's no spice at all, Sila, none whatsoever. But instead of going with ABR order, I kind of thought maybe we would start with Sila's observations as the one person who I can say for sure has seen Cuba with his own eyes, if that's okay with you, Hai.
Sure, it's okay with Sila. Sure.
Thank you. I must clarify that I saw it with my own eyes, yes, but at that point, my eyes and other parts of my body were only 1 year old. So I don't know if that counts. However, if I ever have to tell anyone what I am in terms of where my heart beats and my culture is, that is always Cuba. I'm not, I was born in New York, but I would never say I'm an American. I would also not say I'm a U.S. American. I'm Cuban culturally. Um, Raised by my parents, my father being Cuban, and in the film, I cannot judge. I cannot. I can only go by the impression we get either from films or friends I have in Europe who have been there, or my cousins that have been there, or recounts of my aunt and grandmother when they were alive. What I find interesting and unique is, speaking of the times before, let's say, before the last 70 years, this liveliness and a much more balanced come together that existed on that island. Very, very different times. So in this film, I see that again, this combination of the foreigners mingling and the what do you call that, the feelings, the vibrations of the islanders, uh, black or white, although there are quite strong differences. um, there have always been strong differences, at least from a sector of the people. So I was quite, I'm very romantic when it comes to memories of my father and the person he was. So when I see something about Cuba and I think it is believable, which in my view this film is believable, the the possibilities and um, the satire behind it, I do get very I like it very much. So I like the film quite a bit. It's for me, it's just interesting entertainment, a little bit of twist. There's a couple of things that I would not find very good. I think the the daughter is not a very good actress. I think there are certain situations where I find she, is really, I don't know. She doesn't seem to have, but I don't. That's just my feeling. Um, but I like the film very much. Yeah, go ahead.
Joe Morrow is the name of the actress, by the way, and she got the part through one of those winning a contest to be in a movie type contracts. So yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with you 100%.
yeah. The other ones, specifically, Hausbacher, I think was his name, the German. Of course, Alec Guinness and Maureen O'Hara. There, and even sometimes I'm not so sure about Segura, about his acting and his role, but the acting is quite interesting and it flows quite well. I'll mention a couple of other details perhaps later on, but right now that's all I would say to that.
Thanks for that, Sila. Sorry, I can't keep my thumb off the mute button. Okay, now we'll go in ABR order then, and we'll go with hi. Yes, that's right, Yazzie, because you were late, you get to go last. So, but that also gives you the final word. Hi, Bender. Your thoughts on Our Man in Havana, and had you seen the film before?
I had actually a long time ago, but all I remembered was this guy makes stuff up. And I didn't remember, I remembered very little of it because it was so long ago. Um, so it was almost like seeing it fresh. And I really like this movie, and I also am aware that it has flaws. So let me go through some of the trivia that I found interesting, and then maybe a little talk a little later about um, uh, my personal feelings about it. But there were basically two guys at the time in the 50s who were writing about their experiences as British intelligence officers in World War II. One was Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond novels, and the other was Graham Greene, um, who wrote this movie, who wrote first a novel called Our Man in Havana, and then um, uh, wrote the screenplay for this film. And in fact, uh, the first name of the main character in this movie is also James, and he also has uh, a double a zero a double an O designation, and I don't know, it would take an eagle eye to spot this, but several times during the movie there is a neon business sign next door to Wormold's building which says Bond, but it's it's not referring to James Bond. It's referring to Bond Clothiers, which was founded in Cleveland in 1914, and by the 1940s, it was the largest men's clothiers um, in business, and that sign Bond appears in most large cities. So, but I mean, it's clearly, it's a parody of spy novels, and um, but I think I don't. It's probably not a coincidence that his first name is James, and there's the Bond sign next to his vacuum cleaner store. Um, the Our Man in Havana was the inspiration for John Le Carré's novel The Tailor of Panama, and The Tailor of Panama was probably the inspiration for the character Garrick in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, our Cardassian spy who is a habitual liar and who makes his living as a tailor on the space station. Um, as for, but going back to Le Carré, Alec Guinness, of course, who plays the title character in this movie, uh, um, he played George Smiley in the BBC versions of John Le Carré's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and Smiley's People. So Guinness, went in to have an amazing career playing a spy. Um, so I thought all of those kind of connections are interesting. I loved Guinness in this movie. Also, by the way, last week we did Dr. Zhivago, which Alec Guinness had a major role in, and he complained at the time that you know that David Lean was making him act like a statue. I thought it was really effective. I mean, his being just this kind of straight ramrod, it made him seem so almost superhumanly solid and strong. I thought it was very effective, but it was interesting that he didn't like being directed that way. Well, he didn't like being directed on this movie either, as it turns out. I really, really like both of the performances, but Guinness wrote um, that Reed wanted to play his part differently from what he envisioned. This is quoting from what Guinness actually wrote. I had seen, partly suggested by the name, um, uh, the character's name, that an untidy, shambling, middle aged man with worn shoes, who might have bits of string in his pocket, and perhaps the New Statesman under his arm, exuding an air of innocence, defeat, and general inefficiency. When I explained this to Carol, he said, "We don't want any of your character acting." What an amazing thing to say to Alec Guinness. We don't want any of your character acting. Play it straight. Don't act. That and that Guinness continues. That might be okay for some wooden dish, perhaps, but was disastrous for me. Mustn't act, mustn't act. I kept repeating to myself, and didn't. The director, particularly a world famous one like Carol, is always right, or often so, which is an acted way of saying the director was dead wrong. Um, so I didn't pick up on any of that. I loved Guinness, um, and I'm just I'm rediscovering how great Guinness is with Zhivago in this, and I will confess, after this, I went back and for like the 15th time started rewatching Last Holiday, one of my all-time favorite films. And by the way, Eric, I'm formally requesting that you add that to the list of films we cover. It still holds up for me, and it's another great Alec Guinness performance. But anyway, so there's that in terms of casting. Um, the role of Beatrice, the other spy who comes to help Guinness, uh, was offered to Lauren Bacall, but she turned it down because of delays on shooting Northwest Frontier in London. Um, Columbia Pictures, the studio, wanted to cast actors that would be familiar to American audiences, which is why uh, they got Maureen O'Hara, Burl Ives, and Ernie Kovacs, and also made the daughter American. Um, Reed wanted the daughter played by Jean Seberg, but she'd signed on to make Breathless, so she wasn't available. So then, and here's again, sometimes, Eric, you and I have conflicting stories. I don't know who's right. I just know my source is IMDb. According to IMDb, Joe Morrow got the part because she was recommended by Ernie Kovacs, um, and she was under contract to Columbia at the time, so she was available. And Graham Greene later said that Joe Morrow's performance wrecked the film. So, Sila, you're not alone in thinking her performance was problematic. Graham Greene himself said she wrecked the film. I, I, her performance was definitely problematic. I don't know how much of it was her and how much of it was the way she was directed. But I mean, the thing is, Guinness's character is doing something really huge. And what's his motivation? His motivation is to make his daughter happy so she can have essentially a pony, a horse. Um, and, you want to have that firmly established so it's believable that he would basically risk the security of the entire, British nation um, for the sake of letting his daughter ride a horse. And so her performance becomes important in terms of solidifying the credibility of his motivation in doing what he does. And she just seems like disconnected from anything except her personal little wants and desires. So she's not likable. It's not clear
And a
why.
country club membership. You can't forget that part. It's so
Yeah,
important.
yeah. So I definitely think that Joe Morrow, Joe Morrow's character is a chink in the armor, and her performance. But again, I think the director has to take some responsibility as well. But yeah, that's definitely one of the issues with the film. Just some other quick little interesting tidbits. I'm not going to go for everything, but just for initial, while we're talking about people involved, Alfred Hitchcock was interested in making a film from, 'cause Green's novel was a huge bestseller, and it quickly went up for bid. But Hitchcock, at least according to my source, IMDb source, Hitchcock thought they were asking too much for the rights, so he dropped out, and um, it went to Carol Reed, and became the third. Of course, Green was also very comfortable with Reed because they'd already made two films together beforehand. 1948, uh, uh, Green and Carol Reed made The Fallen Idol. And in 1949, they made their most famous picture, The Third Man. Um, and in some ways, I think the critics maybe were harsher to this film because of A Third Man, because they just felt it wasn't as atmospheric. Um, it wasn't as gripping, and also, and I think there's some validity to this, that Reed wasn't as adept at managing the shifts in mood, because this is a really tricky movie to make. It's a comedy where the hero ends up killing somebody, and not to mention killing a person, and worst of all, for a lot of people, as Eric knows from his experience in the Monday Room, who ends up killing a dog. Um, I mean, you don't kill dogs in movies. You just don't do that. That's like
Not just in
box office.
movies. You don't do that, period.
Yeah,
Humans we're disposable, but
Trigger
here's a
warning,
puppy.
trigger warning.
it's box office poison, is what I'm saying. No pun intended. So, there, so it's a difficult, tight wire to walk in. Arguably, Reed didn't quite pull it off, especially the scene, um, the gun battle. It's really confusing what's going on. Does he mean to murder this man? Does he mean to scare him? Um, because it looks like he's going to walk away, and then how should we feel about that? Um, in the novel, I think he 100% is killing this guy out of revenge because this guy killed his friend. But in the movie, he seems so wishy-washy about killing him. It just kind of kills a lot of the impact. The other thing I had issue with there is it's not crystal clear in the movie why we should care about whether this guy dies or not, because it's like he's just another spy doing his job. He's not like a serial murderer. He's doing his job, and um, he dies. They just take somebody else to replace him. But it wasn't, unless you're establishing that he's a rogue agent or something, they're all just spies doing their spy jobs. So I didn't get this rush of satisfaction. The most satisfaction was, oh, look, Alec Guinness is actually starting to earn his keep. Except what is he really doing by removing one person from a chessboard who's going to replace the next day? But because the game is still in place. So those are some of just I touch on some of the things that that maybe didn't work so well. Um, I also want to mention um, um, my jaw drops at the speed with which films were made in this period, because the Graham Greene novel came out like a year earlier, and then a year after it's released, this film comes out. It's made and it's just out there. It's like we're talking about Rashomon last week, and how Kurosawa made it like 2 months after he started shooting. It was in theaters. I'm just astonished at the speed of filmmakers back then. Um, so anyway, I have other stuff to say, but I don't want to go on and on. But that's some of the things I thought about the film that were interesting. And thank you for letting me share them. I appreciate it.
I would like to comment very shortly, just my opinion. I think the obsession and the necessity of distribution is very, very different to what it was back then. So I think that might be one of the several commercial reasonings for these people being able to bring these works out so quickly. Because there was, I have the impression there was, I don't, you guys know more about cinema than I do, but I have the impression there was less paperwork to do back then. Today, you have to make sure of so many things worldwide. That was not the case before.
I actually have the answer to quite a few of these questions. Number one, Graham Greene wrote the novel with Alec Guinness in mind and with Carol Reed in mind for a film adaptation. And he wrote the novel because he said he was not good at writing screenplays, but he was good at adapting novels. And same as The Third Man, which he wrote a novel with the idea that the film would be made. And so before the novel was even published, Carol Reed was scouting locations in Batista's Cuba, and in between, of course, Fidel Castro had come to power, and Graham Greene had. By the way, he was still an employed agent of MI6 at this point. This was revealed in 1991, but he had been in his capacity for MI6 as a spy, smuggling into the northern mountains of Cuba medical supplies to Castro's rebels. And so when it came time to hey, can we still film in Havana, Castro immediately said yes. And as a matter of fact, he and Graham Greene remained friends until 1968, when Graham Greene stopped visiting Cuba because of a crackdown on his two favorite reasons for being there, which was the readily available prostitutes and cocaine, which I'll get to that story later. But that also goes to Carol Reed's version of Alec Guinness's story about the performance, which was that Carol Reed was like, Graham wrote this part for you. Just read the lines and be Alec Guinness, because he wrote this is Alec Guinness on screen. And what I think Guinness is getting at is that you can't just be you on screen. that's not how acting works. And um, if you can, if and that quote was actually from Alec Guinness's autobiography, and if he continues talking about certain directors that he just doesn't think get the acting process and how the acting process works. And he doesn't cite Reed by name, but by it being in the next paragraph right underneath that story, I think is his implication is that you can't just tell an actor, hey, we wrote this part for you, just be you. And because their question is, well, who am I? So anyway, Yazzie, your thoughts on Our Man in Havana?
A great satire. And to answer, you said you have the answer to everyone's question. I want to say, like, the if we want to look at the female characters, if you want to say, like, the Millie character, she's I don't know, she's very shallow. She's all that explains. First of all, they all play to the elements of satire. If you want to read the movie or consider it as a satire, in that case, it's obvious that these characters are very shallow and they're one-dimensional. There's no the like depth to them, because that's how they can move the plot in the satiric form. And and I think about the distribution, the very quick distribution, we can say it was because of the time. Like, the whole movie plays like a microcosm of history. So um, uh, even though, like, a historical satire. So if you look at it that way, then you can see how important it is to release the movie right before the Cuban Revolution, because the seeds were planted, everything was happening at that time, and right at the beginning of that change, I think it was necessary to release the movie at that time. And yeah, I think, and again, back to the Millie character, I think it was very actually very funny if we want to see it as, it might sound really ridiculous if, like, maybe reading too much into it. But Eric, I told you that, how about, like, reading the movie as the banality of evil? But seriously, just look at it. Like, the bureaucracy, um uh recruiting, hiring someone with no experience in a field that is detrimental, is so important, plays with people's life, plays with politics, plays with this more important, like, political, diplomatic relationships. Just recruit anyone, and that person accept this role. Why? Just to answer to her daughter's financial needs. So I think they all are said very subtle, with very beautifully in the dialogues right at the beginning. Like, when Wormold is talking to her daughter, and wear that hat, and holding that umbrella, and says, like, oh, uh do you remember that clone? And I wish we all could be like clones. And she said, oh, yeah, 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 you know what happened to the clown? The clown fell into the bucket of whitewashing. That's funny. Like, he sees himself as a clown right at the beginning. And then I think this is one of those times that it's important to have actually the knowledge of the writer, because it plays an important role in the novel and in the character. Because just imagine, I think the movie is kind of the plot, the movie, it always kind of play an odd to art, to creativity, to writers, and say, like, if you have that high imagination, if you have the power of creativity, you can fool people with that. You can become your kind of your characters. You can create your own character. You can create your own narrative. So, like, this is exactly what happens here. And based on Graham Greene's actual life story, like, he was someone constantly looking for entertainment, looking for something, constantly traveling, not because he wants a patriot, he wants to work for MI5, he wants a no. He just wanted the money to travel, to see the world, and find subject for his novels, for his writings. And I think that's the part of, to see this more than how can you, as a creator, as a writer, become a part of your own narrative. Or you can also see it as the how much the bigger lie that you say, it's more believable, to the point that you might be part of that lie and live that lie and believe it yourself.
Oh, sorry about that. The hand raising is glitching, so I had to shut it off for now. If we have trouble, I can always turn it back on, but it's glitchy. So if you've received like 3 or 4 messages saying I've invited you to speak, I only invited you once, so no worries. It's just a clubhouse glitch. Hillary, your thoughts on our man in Havana? And by the way, thank you, Yassi. It's so nice to have you back.
I love listening to Yassi talk. She's so passionate about everything, and she's knowledgeable about movies and stuff. So knowledgeable. It's rare you meet somebody who's almost always read the book along with seeing the movie. And I love those comparisons. So y'all know satire is my favorite kind of movie. I love, especially social political satire. So to add on to the story you were just talking about with Fidel, them being friends and whatnot, Fidel actually was like, yeah, we're gonna need to see this in Spanish, and requested him to send him a copy of the script in Spanish so that he could make sure that Cuba was seen in a positive light. And he had some issues with some of the more seedy underlyings of the back alley type things that appeared in the movie. But not enough of an issue to say you can't make the movie, because come on, he wanted the money. I mean, it brought a good light. So and I love that story. There's actually there's some pictures and stuff online of him and Fidel together, just kind of hanging out. It's weird to think of somebody like that, you know, just being a normal guy, hanging out with the guys and stuff. And I don't know, it's Fidel is an interesting study in and of itself. But as for the movie, I think that I, it's very sardonic and very dry and very eloquently written, and I think it went over the heads of probably most of the people at the time who had seen it, because that wasn't really what we were doing then. We were writing hero movies. We were writing political hero movies, spy, cloak and dagger type things that showed America as being always the triumphant winner. And this was something that it allowed us to still say we are smarter than, bigger than, better than. So of course we loved it. Um, because it wasn't an American. It was British, but so America still gets to say, haha, you are all idiots. Um, but it had a very was that I'm trying to think of what movie I want to compare it to. Not Dragnet, but kind of like that kind of humor to it, that I loved. So yeah. I'm a big fan of this entire genre. I think like this led way to movies like uh what the fuck, the one that Inspector Gadget was based off of. What the hell is the name of that movie? Anybody? No? Okay.
Sorry, say it again.
Inspector Gadget was based off of this movie, and I cannot think of it. Damn it. Is it Car 54? No, that's not it. I'll think of it in a minute. It's a spy guy that had all the gadgets and shit before James Bond.
Oh, our man Flint.
Thank
MacGyver?
you. There's certain movies that have this that dry, you just have to kind of be in the headspace to be able to watch them. And this is one of them. When I first saw this, my dad loved these movies. So when I first watched this movie, he was cracking up, and I didn't find the humor in it. I'm like, I don't get it. As an adult, going back, I watched this a couple days ago because I knew it was coming up in the room, and I laughed the whole way through. I chuckled. It was one of those things where you're just like, oh, now I get it. That's fucking hilarious. and its jokes kind of fell flat for the rest of the people that were watching the movie with me. I was like, okay, but I liked it. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Well, I have a lot more to say, but that's all I have to say for now.
First,
But
I
I
just want to. I
thought
want to just.
Inspector Clouseau. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to jump in and say, first of all, Hillary, it's so wonderful to have you in the room. Always a tremendous treat. I'm going to quibble with one thing you said, which is that Castro and his minions checked the script to make sure Cuba was being portrayed in a positive light. It was actually my understanding that the opposite. They wanted to show, because this is Cuba before the revolution, and they wanted the film to portray the harsh brutality of a regime before the revolution.
But what I read was misquoted then. Yeah, cool. I only found it from
Uh,
one source, so interesting.
oh,
Which
me
makes a
too.
lot more
Smart.
sense.
Yeah, the Batista regime, and in fact, they made, as I recall, something like 38 changes to the script to make Cuba seem seedier and worse than the original script. And even so, Castro complained that it didn't sufficiently show how brutal the regime was. But so there was it was a compromise. But yeah. And by the way, Castro himself visited the set on May 13, 1959, at Cathedral Square in Havana. So he was very well aware of this production. Again, Hillary, it's so great to have you here.
Speaking of great to have you, I haven't seen you since last year. I don't know if we just haven't been in the same rooms or what have you, or if you took a hiatus from Clubhouse. But it is great to see you back, and I think this is your first visit to UK cinema history. We appreciate you as a voice of reason on the app, and definitely appreciate you coming. What were your thoughts on Our Man in Havana? And well, we'll get back. Oh, there she is.
Oh no, she's
Sorry, guys. I'm yeah, I had mansple. Hi, good to see you guys. Thanks for asking, and thanks for holding space. I came in late to the party, but I sorry, my brain is full of lots of thoughts.
Don't you hate that?
You know,
Wish there was a
yeah.
basket you could shift it over to for a minute.
Well, you know, I'm gonna blame it on you, Hillary, because you mentioned the genre, and I was like that, and then I started to think about the genre. I was like, oh, that reminds me of did you like sorry to jump films here, like Network, the 1970 mid 70s City Limit film? Did you catch
76.
that one?
Yeah.
76. Thank you. With my dyscalculia,
I
I
need to add
think.
it to my list. I haven't seen it.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, Patty Chayefsky.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then the first one that came to mind was that you might have seen, Hillary, is Wag the Dog, a Barry Levinson film. That was in the 90s, 97, I believe, something like that. Is that typically what you like? Is that one of your your favorite genres, Hillary? Because I have
Oh,
some
you're asking me?
others.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make a little short list because I enjoy too. So I'll include that when I follow up with you.
I'd ask.
I don't have anything thoughtful to say about the film really, other than that hasn't already been said, and I did come late, so I'm happy to be here.
I did get your text,
Thanks,
and I
all.
was going to return your call this afternoon. Things just keep getting
no worries.
crazy.
It's all good, I'm sure. Yeah, and congratulations again. I'm thrilled for you. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you for coming. I'm gonna start with just my thoughts on the film. Are more about why it's not as discussed, I think, as other films in this genre, and I think it has a lot to do with the director being Carol Reed, because Reed is a guy who his greatest achievement, which is considered the matter of fact, the BFI voted it the best British film of all time in 1999. The Third Man is, if you ask a common person on the street, credited to Orson Welles for some reason. If you ask somebody at
Not gonna
random,
lie, I'm glad you said that because I thought the exact same thing. I really did. I don't know why I thought that, but I thought the same thing. That it was Orson Welles.
yeah, if you ask a random person on the street, they'll tell you Orson Welles directed The Third Man, and it got to a point where Peter Bogdanovich's introduction and the Criterion version of The Third Man states that while Orson Welles didn't direct it, Carol Reed couldn't have made the film if Orson Welles hadn't made Citizen Kane beforehand, which is ridiculous
I wonder if that's a
on its
Mandela
face.
effect.
It's just it is just simply, a guy showed up on the set for 3 days and became the most memorable thing in the movie because Harry Lime is just such a memorable character. Orson Welles did create the most famous line for that movie, the cuckoo clock reference, but he had nothing to do with setting up the shots. Carol Reed shoots almost exclusively with telephoto lenses, whereas Orson Welles shoots almost exclusively with very wide-angle lenses. That's what he's famous for. Carol Reed is famous for using very high, arching overhead shots. Orson Welles literally dug holes in the studio to get his camera low enough, and would put ceilings on sets because the ceiling was going to always be in the shot. I mean, the two are completely divergent, and yet you have somebody as eminent as Peter Bogdanovich playing into this legend that somehow or another Carol Reed is not deserving of being considered a great director. His exact words were, "This is probably the best film made by a non-auteur," and that is on the introduction to the Criterion disc. So I love hitting for the underdog, but when it comes to
I'm having a really hard time hearing you because of the wind in the background. Like really hard time hearing you.
I'm moving, so give me just a moment.
No worries. Also, I would love it if you did a room one night, or not in here, but like just a separate room on film styles and stuff, because you're very knowledgeable about that. And I love. It seems like everybody wants to do the Kubrick and those type of rooms that have been done to death. I'd love to do something like Orson Welles. Like things like you said. I didn't know about the whole ceiling thing. I can't think of a single movie I've ever seen that actually shows a ceiling unless it was directly about like a painting on the ceiling or something like that. Directors just don't do that because they have the ceilings, in sets and stuff. You don't have a ceiling, so I've never noticed that. And I want to go back and watch some Orson Welles stuff and see what I can find.
Well, we rescheduled an Orson Welles film for the end of the month, Chimes at Midnight.
Perfect.
So we'll be. Tune in for that. That'll be on the. Just click on over. We've scheduled all the way through May. So my reasoning for that was because for the 1944 in film, we're doing Henry V, and Henry V doesn't make a lot of sense without Henry IV Part 1 and 2, and that's the only film adaptation of it, and it happens to have an all-British cast, so it worked out. But but I take up for Carol Reed in this auteur argument. People say, well, he had the 3 great films, Odd Man Out, The Third Man, and Fallen Idol. But that he didn't have a distinctive directing style of his own, or if he did have a directing style, it was the Dutch angle. That is, to the point where William Wyler actually sent him a level as a gift because he joked that one of his legs on his tripod must be broken in every single one of his films. But when we look at the 3 films that Greene made with Carol Reed, the Dutch angle is very, very important because that is Carol Reed saying alienation. You are alienated. You are seeing things from an outsider's point of view because whether it's the character, whether it is you as an audience, alienation is the point. And so when people criticize this film because it didn't have the atmosphere of a third man or an odd man out, I think they're missing what Carol Reed was trying to purvey in this very dark comedy, which is all in the titles of these Graham Greene adaptations: odd man out, third man. It is all about someone who is alienated from society in one way, shape, or form. But to me, uh, this film doesn't work very well anymore as a comedy. And I'm saying this as someone who hadn't seen the film since the 1990s and remembered it as being a rather funny comedy in the kind of Ealing British comedy tradition with Alec Guinness as a comic figure. But so much happened since then, and the central premise that seemed extremely funny to me after we invaded Iraq over weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, based on the word of a spy who was just doing it for the money. This isn't a comedy anymore. This is real life. And the actually the Wormold character was someone Green based on a real life spy who is known to history as Garbo, but was a Spanish spy who his real name was Juan Pulo Garcia, who became a member of MI6 because he unaffiliated began selling information to the Nazis that was just wrong, and MI6 ended up picking him up during World War II because his information, false information to the Germans, was actually doing more good for them than some of their hired spies. So there was a serious real life person, another serious real life person in both the novel and the film is Gregory Aslan as Fuentes, who of course is based on I can't remember the guy's name, but Batista's right hand man, who it wasn't a cigarette case made out of human skin; it was a wallet made out of human skin, and he really did carry it around, show it to people, and brag about it. That was legitimately true. But interestingly enough, Graham Greene, at the time that he was researching this, befriended both sides, both the Batistists and the Castro rebels. And while also working for MI6, who at the time, they didn't know Castro was going to be a communist. And as a matter of fact, when this film came out, no one knew that Castro was going to be a communist. He hadn't made that decision yet. He hadn't aligned with the Soviet Union yet. And but the United States only knew that Batista was a very pro-American regime. And so since MI6 was obviously on the side of the British, they didn't really care whether or not Castro was going to give good trade deals to either the mafia or who was basically put in charge of the secret police by the Batista regime at this point, or American sugar traders. And thought that perhaps Castro would be a good thing because they could open up better trade with Cuba, which is why they had actually allowed Green to smuggle medical supplies to him. But I'm going to tell trigger warning. I'm going to tell my favorite story about the time period in Cuba when Graham Greene was writing this. He had a mistress in Cuba. Um,
I'm sorry. Before you get to your favorite story with the trigger warning, can I just say something about the Dutch angle and the tilted camera? And I think you know
I'd be
when we
disappointed
get
if
to
you
the third
didn't,
act
Yassi.
of if we get to the third act of when we get to the third act of the film, like when the butterfly effect of Wormold, these fabrication of reality and these fabricated reports, we start to seeing the results of that, the consequences of that. The tone of the film starts to change, like right before the murder of the Captain Mortez, the pilot. Everything, like we constantly hear that the that theme, the song, the music, everything is more comical. But then after that, when he starts seeing what he has done, results and the harm that he had done, and it wasn't just when he starts seeing it, when it actually happens, then we start getting these more, the chiaroscures become more like darker, the contrasts are darker, and then we begin to see these tilted camera angles, and it gives this for the moments of suspense, especially when he's walking with Carter in the streets of Havana, and because we know the distress that he's feeling, and everyone's dead, his best friend is dead, and now he's worried about his life, his daughter's life, and then we see a lot of those. So that's why, like, we still have that authorial elements here, and I think it's played displayed perfectly also, because we don't need them at the like first two acts. Why we don't need that sense of unease, and the psychological uh the psychology of the protagonist is totally fine. He's a man, he's like making up all these stories and making money out of it, and life is beautiful. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be for him. Everything is working out for him. He's vacuum cleaning everything in his life. But then everything starts to change. So we see changes in, like, in visual technical aspects of the film. Everything, like, and I love at the beginning, like, the use of split screen when he's dreaming of the actual, like, Bond life, and that we see him on the right side of the screen, that he's typing his story, and on the left side we see all this, like, he portrayed as this Bond style with his, like, fancy suit with beautiful ladies, and like, mm, and the bathroom scene, we see how he like describes it with the vows. It's so
Which
funny. That's
I'm so
great.
surprised they allowed him to get away with that, especially using Noel Coward, who was in the news at that time for having picked up homosexuals at bathrooms. Uh,
That joke landed
uh, uh,
perfectly.
I was
and they
thinking
just
about that.
and the censors never even said anything about it.
That is amazing. Just two quick things.
They
I
didn't get
think
it.
one of the big challenges of a movie, and why it doesn't quite work, um, is, you don't normally start in one genre and then switch gears into another genre. That's not what we're trained to expect. And I don't think it entirely works in this case. You start out as a comedy, you can't, and it doesn't ever want to entirely let go of being a comedy, given, for example, the ending, which is an entirely comedic and satiric ending. Um, it's a really difficult tightrope to walk, like I said earlier. Um, I also wanted to say, regarding why the film isn't a comedy, because of real world events. Um, Not just that there really are people who do that, um, because of course misinformation is a major tool in the spy world, but also because from the other direction, the film was too accurate in terms of its lie, because he's basically saying he made up this thing about Cuba harboring this huge weapon that's going to be a threat to the West, and then Castro aligns with the Soviet Union, and you've got the Cuban Missile Crisis, which almost resulted in the annihilation of the world through thermonuclear war. So this movie is arguably prescient, is predicting the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, which is an especially funny thing either. So there's this real tug of war between comedy and and tragedy in this movie. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that, Eric. Please tell. I'm dying to hear your favorite story about Cuba.
No, I'm sorry. Something. It doesn't change the genre, and it doesn't even change the style, because satire is Horatian satire, Juvenalian satire, and Menippean satire. And all these are satires, each of them meant to evoke different feelings. Like Django Unchained, Django is a satire, but is a drama kind of satire. It doesn't lose the consistency of the satire theme all along. It keeps it. But at the beginning, we see more irony than the ending, but it's still satire all along.
I will respectfully disagree with you. Django Unchained is a consistent film, and this film doesn't quite manage it.
Look, at the beginning, it's Horatian satire. It provokes. It's like kind of like Doctor Strangelove. It meant to be comical. When we get at the beginning, at the middle of the film, it's Juvenalian satire. It's kind of like it starts with, it meant to make us angry. Like, why the Home Office, why the politicians are believing this, why even the people in the top of the hierarchy, why the idiocy is still there, why they don't see it. And then when we get to the ending, it's Menippean satire. It's anger. It's the criticism, is the critic of the whole system, is the critic of belief, is the critic of economy. And yep, you can go disagree, but that's the proof.
Yeah, I do disagree, but I respect your right to have a differing opinion from me.
No, don't just
Yeah,
disagree.
both can be
Bring
correct.
evidence. Like, why don't you disagree? Because that's how the satire works. The
Well,
three act satire.
I'm gonna defend High, because what he said was that it's not that the satire doesn't work; it's that he didn't think the shift in tone as the film gets gradually darker
But that's
worked.
how
So
satire works.
just to kind of put what. I'm just putting High's real, as opposed to arguing a false point. His real point, and it didn't work for him, which is fair
And
enough.
by the way, I shouldn't need defending. I should be able to state an opinion, and you can take it or leave it. But there's no need to argue about it.
All right, I'm going to tell my story of Graham Greene and the man with Cuba's largest penis. Yeah, so Graham Greene, very beloved in Cuba because, of course, among British writers, he was really the only Catholic who was covering Catholicism at the time. And he was also one of the few writers who was consistently traveling to Central and South America, and writing about them from a Catholic point of view. But while he was researching this, he did smuggle the medical goods into Castro's army. However, once he was done with that and he hit the streets of Havana, he picked up his lover, who he remained and would live with when he was in Cuba up until 1968, and they went to a bar to watch live sex acts with the a man who was advertised as having Cuba's largest penis, who would swing on a trapeze over the audience naked, and then perform sex acts on stage with people in the audience who volunteered. And Graham Greene realized that things had gone too far, so he and his lover exited very, very, very quickly. And spent the rest of the night attempting to score cocaine in every corner of Havana, because in Greene's words, he couldn't come down to having seen that. Graham Greene had what we now call an undiagnosed case of bipolar disorder, and depending on where he was in the world, he would self-medicate. So when he was in Asia, he used opium. When he was in the Americas, he would use cocaine, and when he was in or when he was home, he would use whiskey. So yeah, interesting. Revelation onto the type of research that he did for this particular film.
Did that make him a security risk to his MI6 employers?
Seeing as they kept him employed until he died in 1991, I guess he wasn't any more of a security risk than any of their other agents. But he was somebody who could get the goods. For instance, when he wrote The Quiet American in Vietnam, he was able to actually, because of his notoriety, get an interview with a translator with Ho Chi Minh. And he was simply, too valuable a resource, I guess, for them to really worry about his security status.
I guess in a spy world, it takes all kinds, and you're very open to a wide range of employees.
It is also interesting to Yassi's point about the satire, that Greene really seemed to have toned it back a lot, given what he knew of the real Havana. This could have been a much more, and of course I've read the novel as well, a much more cutting condemnation of Batista's regime, and I wonder if some of that was just kind of not wanting to blow the lid on his favorite playground, which is basically what he treated Cuba as, up until 1968, when they finally got around to cracking down on all of that nonsense. Because when he first went to Cuba and they asked him why, he said it was because everything that we consider immoral is legal there, and so and I wonder if there was just kind of because when you read The Quiet American, he does not pull a single punch about Southeast Asia. When you read even I can't remember, it was at the Comedians, he doesn't pull a single punch about Haiti, but he had that but when he comes out with his one on Cuba, it's soft-sold a little bit, I think, personally. And now I think this, personally, I agree with Yassi in terms of the tone of this film. It works for me. It absolutely works for me as a dark comedy with lighter comic characters. It doesn't feel like oil and water, and I didn't feel that transition. But to High's point, I think that's a matter of taste, and I don't. And I've said this before. I will have arguments up to the wazoo about technique and everything else. I don't want arguments about taste in this room because we can't arbitrate what people like, you know? And I don't like that concept because because for there to be a right and a wrong, then you have to say this is a superior form of, and there are other rooms on Clubhouse that do this all the time, you know, which, and it irritates me there. And I just, I'm not going to put up with that here in this room. Argue in terms of anything you want in terms of what works for you and what doesn't work for you, as long as you start it with, in my opinion, or at least it's implied, then that's fine. And I can disagree with you, but but anyway, so I'll get off my get off my high horse here. But that's just how I feel about things. Uh, I just don't think that that is you know, a good use of our time, especially you know, when talking about going on 70-year-old films. So anyway,
Well, I don't think the age of a film has anything to do with it. It's just let's be respectful to each other. The and you know, saying something louder doesn't really uh, fix anything. The one other thing about the film that didn't entirely work for me is at the beginning the the establishment of the British agency as being as inept as it is. It's we're supposed to feel. I mean, it's a satire, so we're supposed to feel that MI6 is uh, is well, at the end of the film, we're basically supposed to feel they're not only inept but immoral and unethical. And um, I don't I don't feel that they did enough to establish that at the start. Um, Noel Coward is not James Bond, but he's not. He doesn't seem. I mean, he seems kind of out of touch, but I don't know. I just felt like there was a little bit of a disconnect, um, for me at least, between the level of ineptness established for MI6 and then the extent to which they were bamboozled. Um, so um, I think I would have preferred if the ineptness and also the uh, at the end, Maureen O'Hara talks about, lack of loyalty and stuff like that, and lack of essentially saying they lack character. And I just don't feel that was established sufficiently at the beginning of the film. So it took the edge off the satire for me. Um, I appreciated the satire and I enjoyed it, but I wish it had been better grounded. Just as I said earlier, I wish that the relationship with his daughter had been more firmly established to give him a motivation to be that extreme in taking such extreme actions to get money to support her in the lifestyle she wanted. I just wish they had spent a little more time and energy in building the foundations that the film stands upon. And I want to be clear, I really, really like this movie, and I love Alec Guinness in it, and it's an amazing cast. Um, I like this movie, but I also am trying to be sensitive to what I perceive as its flaws. In part because, I, I'm involved with writing movies, and I'm always looking for what somebody does right and wrong, so that I and others in the room can learn from it.
I'll have you know, Eric, that I have licked many movies, many movies, and only one of them was in good taste. But then I realized it was a fruit roll up and not actually a film roll. But that said, no movie really tastes good, so stop licking them.
You can't tell me what to do.
I love you so much.
Have you ever tried emulsion? I tell you, once you try it, you won't go back. Um, I want to give Yazzie a chance to respond because she's back channeling me, and I will. So I will. But I'm gonna disagree and say that ineptness worked for me on not just on a satirical level, but here's where my mind went with it. You know, when you start a job and you're over your head, and everyone just seems to know everything, and then all of a sudden you slowly realize that everybody here doesn't know what the fuck they're doing either, and
Oh
they're
my
just
God, you just
pretending.
described the year I turned 40 and every year since. It's such a relieving feeling.
Yeah, you know that
We're all full
where
of
you
shit.
just realize that nobody else knows what the fuck they're doing anyway, and I think what the kind of over the topness of the ineptness of MI6 there's a way around telling this story as straight satire, and there's a way around this as being a light Ealing comedy, and I think that they tread that very, very well because of the gravitas of the actors being used. Ralph Richardson, Noel Coward. That that I got that feeling at first. Okay, well, these are the guys who know what they're doing, and then when you get the realization that nope, they don't know what the fuck they're doing either, it works for me, and it worked for me on that level. But I'm willing to open up the room to the conversation. Did this feel like a comedy to you?
Like I said
All the
earlier,
way
not when I was
through.
younger, but as an adult, it's hilarious. Like I literally watched it this week. It is very funny as an adult, especially because you know what was going on at that time, and you know how things evolved and how things, where we're at today, and we have a lot more information about, those experiences, whatnot from that time. So, yeah, as an adult now, looking back at it, fucking hilarious. I mean, genuinely chuckled out loud even a couple of times. Uh, would I label it a comedy? No, it's not like Airplane or anything like that. But there is so many like Easter egg type jokes in there that you had to know what was going on. I mean, you had to have the inside on it, or you're not going to get it. But here, zip, zip, in the future, where we are, we can look back at that and go, "Oh, that's funny."
But I don't see this as having a lot of funny lines. I think it has some of the great lines, and I wrote down a few that I'll share before the end. But I think it has a lot of very, very funny situations. You know, Hasselbecker's researches into the blueness of cheese. You know, that in itself is just comic as hell. The fact that the drawings are of a vacuum cleaner, that's comic in itself. The fact that he puts snow on the mountains in Cuba in the middle of summer is hilarious. I lived near Richmond, Virginia, which is parallel to the northernmost point of Cuba, and you barely get snow in January there. And I think that's hilarious, but it's situational. I don't think this is a film where the comedy comes out of the dialogue and things like that. And so to me, and I'm going to say the trigger warning, the funniest scene in this film, to me, where I laughed out loud, is when the dog gets poisoned. Quite honestly, on a very dark level, that worked for me just as straight satire. And in the world of the film, that worked for me. But when we were discussing the washroom scenes, where the first one with Noel Coward, and then the second one where it's obvious obvious that they think he's trying to pick them up for a tryst, and but then the fact is the result of that is that pilot gets killed by whoever the other side is, and so it becomes dark because there is a cost, and so uh, I, I never want to say it doesn't work for me as a comedy because these situations are comic, but I don't think this works dialogue wise as a place for a lot of funny lines. You aren't going to go through and my favorite line is the one that Maureen Hara has, which I wrote it down here. I don't give a damn about men who are loyal to the people who pay them to organizations. I don't even think my country means that much. There are many countries in our blood, aren't there? But only one person. Would the world be in the mess it is if we were loyal to love and not countries? That's a great line, and I really think it sums up a lot of the themes of the film, and it is being told during an absurdly comic situation where he's having to come clean and explain all of the coincidences that have led her to believe that he's actually the spy. I think it's a different kind of comedy. It's because it's not based on rhythm. It's not based on set up, gag, laugh, set up, gag,
No, it's not
laugh.
humorous, but it is an intellectual, a deeper kind of comedy.
Kathy, thank you for coming to the stage. Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm right. I always join so late. I'm so sorry. So I haven't seen this film in a long time, but my mum was a huge fan. So I remember her saying to me, because she grew up in after the war, and her mum was like, oh no, even to the Beatles, we can't have that. That's inappropriate. And she was like the 60s kind of hippie kind of girl, even though she went to a Catholic school. So she gave me the best view, and she was like, I remember this film was I think she said it was based on a book, but they didn't get the full rights for the story, so they created their own spin on it, so it went down as some kind of parody. So when you're saying there's no full rhythm, that's just probably because they're like, right, okay, there's a great storyline, but what can we do with it? And we're going to get the best cast, and we're going to pull the best of what we can get out of it. But as I said, I haven't seen this since I was a little girl, and I can't even remember half of it. And I do have a funny fact about Alec Guinness.
Please tell us a funny fact about Alec
Okay,
Guinness.
so he was arrested for homosexual acts in a public toilet and fined 10 guineas in the 40s.
Which again makes those scenes in the restroom all the more.
Yes, they all knew, who they were, and it was at a time where they were like, right, we're gonna come out and tell people who we are, a bit like the Monty Python kind of vibe, like putting it in your face, carry on kind of way. But it's like, because it's done with comedy, that's fine, but then there's also a cleverness to it as well. But yeah, anyway, that was my 2 pence. I haven't watched the film. I never do, and I'm so sorry, but I will watch it, and I always
We love
do.
having you here, Kathy. You know that.
Oh, thank you. I am so sorry. I keep missing the room, and I love Hillary. Hillary's the best ever.
Totally. And I can't express how much I appreciate you saying that's my 2 pence. I've never heard that, and I totally love it.
Oh yeah, that's a very old. I think it might be an English saying, like, that's my 2 cents. Like,
Are they crooked?
sorry,
Are the pens crooked?
pence. Oh no, I said 2 cents.
Oh, you said cents. I thought you said pence. Okay.
Oh no,
Well,
pence.
in for
I thought it was
Pence is another.
when she said it.
in for a penny and out for a pound, right?
No, pennies and 2 pennies we still have from like the 1940s. and and sometimes I'll look for something to do with the kids. Let's find the oldest dated penny, but they're not crooked. They're made of copper. But you can see the change. I'm a geek. I love nostalgia. You can see the Queen's portrait over time change. But I do have like even older money than that. No, it's not crooked. In fact, no, definitely not. I've still got a £1 note, which is my great uncle's from before the war as well.
I was being just funny about that song that refers to the crooked pens. That's all.
Oh, crooked pence, like Michael Pence.
Here, drop the
Well,
link.
it's
Trousers.
I'll look
getting
it
too
up. I want to hear it.
complicated. It's getting too complicated.
It's trousers, as you all say across the pond there.
Oh
No,
no!
no, no,
So
no,
Yeah.
that
no. The
no,
song
no.
refers to
Here's
pens.
the funny thing, just briefly. Trousers, I know what they are. Yeah, baggy trousers, but that's London. In Liverpool, we say pants.
I'd like to remind the audience that hand raising is temporarily turned off because of the glitch. So if you want to join the conversation, you just have to tap unmute.
No, I turned it back on.
Oh, well, I'd like to remind the audience that
Can
if you want to participate, raise your hand and we'll see if the glitch is
can I
fixed.
just say really quickly? I've got the the captions on, and that just come up as say Henry raising. It's
No, we won't be raising Henry until the last week of April, when, of course, we will be doing Henry the Fifth.
Henry. No, 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 I won't go there.
That's funny.
May
I
I
dropped a bunch of
share?
little one-liners that I thought were really worthy of quote in the chat. By the way, Eric.
I would
Please.
like to share something so that you all know what I was talking about. There was a crooked man, and he walked a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence against a crooked stile. He bought a crooked cat, which caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in a little crooked house.
I
Yeah,
remember
that
that.
a crooked man is someone who does things against the grain.
So Graham Greene.
Well, it could be Michael Pence.
Uh, but Michael Pence calls his wife mother, so I don't think he's crooked ever. Back to our man in Havana, however. Here's something that occurs to me as to why this film doesn't get talked about the way like a Third Man does, and given the history around the film and how much Graham Greene was right. I think there is something about once the Soviet Union allied with Cuba and the Castro regime, that anything that showed Cuba as anything except the enemy just kind of slipped out of our consciousness as a people. And to me, it is surprising this didn't get the kind of reappraisal from the Martin Scorsese's of the world after the Cold War was over, or after the Iraq War, where so much of what happened in this film happened in reality. You know, but any other ideas as to what? I think Kai would probably say it has to do with the shift in tone. But any other ideas why a film like this has kind of slipped through the cracks, given this cast, this director, this writer, and the historical importance, and just how much of this film actually became reality? Any thoughts on that?
Michael Moore.
Not on that note, but I got to jump off real quick. But I wanted to say I left the link. If you guys want to click on it real quick, this is the book. This is for free. You can download the book right now, read it, have it, own it. The link is in the chat. Enjoy.
Thank you, Hillary. It's always
Love
wonderful
you
to
guys.
hear you.
Bye, and I love you so much,
Love you
Kathy.
too.
Thank you, Hillary. Hope to join us next week for Sleuth.
Absolutely.
That'll be hosted by Sila Blume. Sila Blume will be our host with the most for the next 2 weeks.
I'm trembling already.
You're always trending.
Have we got a
Trembling,
green room
trembling.
organised?
Not quite yet. We're working on it. Yazzie and I have been talking in chat. Look, we haven't even come up with a title yet because that's how we plan stuff.
Well, no, maybe call it the green room.
It took us 3 years to get this rolling, so
Is that a pun?
maybe. Sometimes
I just, I'm sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to say in terms of the comedic element, what I mentioned what doesn't work. It's not. It's the shift in tone is one thing. The other, again, I don't feel that the underpinnings were sufficiently built. Um, but what one of the things that worked for me best, of all the things that were mentioned, plus I can't emphasize how much I love Alec Guinness's performance. This is a guy who can play really serious roles but is a really skilled comic. And I don't think people talk enough about Guinness's comedic ability. This is, I mean, it's almost like a Buster Keaton in
Right.
terms of his.
You're right. It's because he is like he is the one who. It's like the Monty Python kind of vibe. It's like it's a little slap in the face of what the establishment wants. So it's calling them out without calling them out in the way that they want people to. So they they can't do anything about it. So they'll never promote it. But then like Alec Guinness, like he's so acclaimed because he 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 was so talented and respected in every way.
Yeah, he's awesome. And I think he's awesome in this movie because he's, you know, the challenge, as I said, the challenge, excuse me, challenge of the film is the balancing of comedy and drama. He embodies that in his body and his facial expressions. Um, you just me at least when I'm watching, I just sense this this mischievous mischievous guy with his tremendous sense of humor who's keeping it bottled up to do this kind of uh, stone-faced performance that is effectively a long joke. Um, it's a balancing act to me that he does a whole film, and there's tremendous comedic energy in that balancing act. So I just want to put a word in, and I think my suspicion is that Carol Reed um, depended a lot on Guinness's performance to be the anchor that pulls us through the film as to get us past the shift. And I think to a large extent it does, but not. I would I would suggest not to a sufficient extent for American audiences to fall in love with a movie, because again, shifting genres is just not something that's done very much, especially in comedies. There's certain expectations for comedies that this film violates. And sometimes you can, sorry about my throat, sometimes you can break rules and get away with it, but it's really hard. So that's my suspicion.
I think Audrey Hepburn had a lot of that kind of like obviously she could do comedy and she was beautiful, and then like Marilyn Monroe was the same. They had a lot of talent but they were pigeonholed, and then when they did, so they were put into positions that were comedic but also like cleverly placed, so it was comedy on so many levels but also appealed to.
Kathy. please. Now, you're from England. You know better than that. Alec Guinness was a prime comedian. Think of all the Ealing comedies that he made in the 40s and
Oh, not
50s. You know,
him. I
the
said Audrey Hepburn.
Lavender Hill Mob. You know, I mean, I think in England he's discussed as that being a comic genius. You know, lady killers, kind hearts and coronets. I mean,
Eric?
you know.
Eric, I said Audrey Hepburn.
Can you repeat that? I had trouble hearing you.
I said Audrey Hepburn and Marilyn Monroe were placed in such positions that people around the world with different expectations or different audiences would have that. That's why sometimes they may not come across as popular in certain roles with certain people. So I was agreeing. I was saying like that for me, Audrey Hepburn. I think she's really funny, but some people don't see that, especially the narcissistic, shall we say, old school males were just like, oh no, she's just in there for a bit of eye candy. But it's like, no, she had some amazing lines, Marilyn Monroe. So I was talking about that from a female perspective.
Yeah, I just rewatched Robin and Marion, and she is funny from beginning to end in that film. Absolutely perfect, and it's like, and Audrey Hepburn's a good metaphor because her comic thing, like in Roman Holiday, is the same kind of Buster Keaton stone face, you know, but the female equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like I'm playing dumb, but she isn't dumb. It's fantastic, and that's to me like Alec Guinness and those old school, really clever comedians. They were playing the long game. They were like, you know what? I'm gonna go down in history for having a go at you in the right way. So much so, people will discuss this for years, and it'll all come out, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And now, a funny tie-in between this film and our film next week. Number one, they both have the same cinematographer, Oswald Morris, whose work we discussed on The Entertainer. He did all of Tony Richardson's films as well, and shot all of Carol Reed's films from the 50s and 1960s. But the other thing is that one of the impetuses for Greene writing this novel to make it into a film with Alec Guinness as his main character was the adaptation in 1955 of his novel The Quiet American about the French Indochina and specifically Vietnam, because he felt that the director, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who directed next week's film Sleuth, so yeah, what a tiny cinema world we live in, had betrayed his novel by adding a scene in a car at the end where we get a lecture about how America really should involve itself in the Vietnam War or the domino effect and blah 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 communism, and little American flag
It's
share
really
country.
windy. All I can hear is
You know, I do want to say this for this cigar,
How
though.
can you blow and talk at the same time?
I must say this for this Cuban cigar. I lit it an hour and 43 minutes ago, and I still have about
please.
2.5.
Eric, that's not you blowing the cigar. Please tell me that's not you. Please tell me that's the
No,
outside wind.
that's the outside wind. Okay, but back to what I was saying. It is interesting that this. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, what's the
Much better.
film?
The Quiet American stars Audie Murphy and Michael Redgrave. It was in 1955. It was remade
Oh,
with Michael Caine,
Redgrave
who's
is
in,
amazing.
uh, and Brendan Fraser and the Audie Murphy. And I like the film a lot, the Joseph Mankiewicz version, not the remake. Even though the remake is much more faithful to Greene's novel, the casting of Audie Murphy as this kind of gung ho American, naive kid, which is what the Brendan Fraser role in the remake, is, I think, just absolutely perfect. Is just
Oh
because
wow, it's
when
Malkovich.
what
Is that Malkovich?
no
The director of the
no,
58 film?
no, Herman Mankiewicz, yeah, whose brother wrote Citizen Kane, but no, he was the director of things like All About Eve, and he did that disastrous version of Cleopatra that almost put
Oh,
yeah. But and next week's film Sleuth, which but I'll leave those details till next week.
do you
But
have
yeah, interesting
do you
tie-in.
have like themed films? So when it's coming up to Halloween or coming up to the festive period.
Absolutely. And I just had an idea for a theme. I think we need to get some more information out there on Ealing comedies so that people can remember what a comic genius Alec Guinness was.
What about Laurel and Hardy?
Never, not even on a Sunday.
What? You've never heard of Laurel and
No, they're
Hardy?
not English is all. I
I think one of them is.
Oh yeah,
Is
yeah, you're right. Stan Laurel is technically British. Yeah, although he only spent 14 years in England and spent the rest of his life in
What about
America.
Charlie
But
Chaplin?
again, I don't really consider. But never mind.
He
But
went to school in Liverpool, in my city, and he was half Irish. So for me, he always used to come back to Liverpool and also to Ireland to visit the hunger strikers. But anyway, that's another conversation.
I wanted to share a couple of points just because I want to hear your opinion on that or explanation or whatever. Just three. One connects with what Hai said before about the director being responsible. When he's about to go for the walk to meet the the agent, and he says goodnight to his daughter with the umbrella, and they have this little conversation about the clown and everything. What is she doing picking on her nose like she's nervous about something and I don't understand what that is. She's not really picking into her nose, but there's something she seems to be hiding when she's in bed, turning her face away and playing with some section around her nose or mouth.
she bought a
That's
saddle and bridle for the horse,
and
and
it's
she
bothering her.
hadn't worked up the guts to ask him for the horse yet.
Okay. The other one is that's just a commentary. I find those so-called collection of little bottles quite ugly, but that's just my perception. And what is this Cuban couple who is shown at the very beginning before the title comes in, where the man stands up and he sees this woman and she throws an apple at him and they keep coming up in different situations together. What do they have to do with the movie?
That is what Carol Reed used to just call a bit of business, and it doesn't work in this film the way it does normally in his films. But yeah, he always would have these little kind of, he thought they were jokes, but he would just kind of intercut these types of things into the film. Like meanwhile, and you're right, it doesn't work in this one.
The
And
bottles I'll explain in the book. He collects novelty whiskey bottles and then it pays off during that game of checkers.
yeah, yeah, my point with that is that he seems to, I mean, let me put it this way. I I have done some collecting, and I think that this drive to collect things creates a passion for the object. as a result, we put them in a very nice place. These bottles were in a very weird table, exposed to dust. It was like that doesn't look like a collection for the except for the matter that they're collected into one spot. But it looked very strange. And then just one line that I liked, among others, when the Hasselbauer, I think is his name, the German doctor, he says, um, "I'm interested in life. You're interested in the person, not in life." I found that I like that statement.
Yeah, and it is interesting that he gives Hasselbeck all the great lines, you know. They can print statistics and count populations in hundreds of thousands, but to each man, a city consists of no more than a few streets, a few houses, a few people. Remove those, and the city no longer exists except as a pain in the memory, like the pain of an amputated leg, no longer there.
And I must add something to the whole thing. The the experience of listening to all of you with your viewpoints, with the explanation and viewing and symbolic and and camera angles, and there's so much information that you provide, for example, in this particular room today, that when you see this film, you must see it again. There is so much, not to the point that I think I saw another film, because I recall, I could make the references, but I find it is very profound to be able to see the film, then listen to a lot of things that were said today in the room, and then watch the film again. And I think you recognize and you discover a lot of layers to the film that you can never see when you see the film once on your own.
Sila, I'll give you something else to to look for the next time you watch. Um, when the sorry, when the daughter puts the saddle on her horse, the saddle is backwards.
I noticed that. Yeah, that I that I noticed. I said
Very
that
deep.
doesn't look right.
Oh, and
No,
also,
but the whole bottles and the checkers and the everything. It's because it shows that there is no true intellect in the characters. You know, the Shakespeare that they read is the version of Shakespeare for kids.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
don't play chess, they play
correct.
checkers.
Yeah,
You know, that yeah, it's all shows that banality that
yeah.
these the even love, the love that happens in the movie is so shallow, it just happens. You know, there's no depth to it.
That's
So it's because like they send the character, and yeah, look, we send a woman as a secretary, and her intelligence and her knowledge is ignored. She's just there to be this perfect, beautiful woman to play as to this man's, all also they consider that let's send a woman so that if the guy fails, it doesn't show what a failure the establishment is of sort.
well,
So they all played, and yeah, it's the Vapids and all.
yeah, and it's good that you mentioned that because I kept wanting to talk about, well, not talk, but mention the the view I had was that I find she's absolutely, Maureen O'Hara is absolutely gorgeous, and she plays her part very well. But even though I see that they're at the restaurant and they caught each other's eyes, nevertheless, I don't see a development into them becoming together at the end. It just nothing, nothing. I see nothing where something sparks. But in the end, they're together. I say, why are they together?
Yeah, it's a classic work romance, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
but it's
she
so undercovers. Nothing really happens.
I totally agree. I didn't mention that, but that's another. It's another example for me of where the work of creating a foundation to get the emotional payoff just didn't happen. Maybe, and I can rationalize that, these things were done because comedy, speed is part of comedy. And you don't want to, I mean, it's a tug and pull. On the one hand, you want to get things quickly to things quickly because that's how comedy works. You don't want to spend too much on the setup. But in my view, I think they made the wrong choice. I think they should have spent more time on the setup to make the punchline really fly. So, but I can understand the choice they made. It's not like a mystery to me. Um, Comedy is a delicate thing, and I wanted to mention, Eric, you mentioned uh, cigars. Ernie Kovacs reportedly smoked 25 Cuban cigars every day of a filming. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the story.
That might be true, but very, very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, because I'm just now putting mine out from 2 hours ago, so there aren't enough hours in the day.
Well, George Burns allegedly smoked 10 or 11. I smoke normally one or two. I don't recall the last day I smoked three. It's very difficult. For me, it is also very difficult because I just, I cannot abuse my palate like that. But each cigar, when I smoke it properly, and I think most cigar smokers that are really enjoying it do smoke it properly, meaning the timing means somewhat between 1 and 2 hours for each cigar. I'm sorry. How can you ever really smoke 25 cigars? It's just crazy.
I'll give you a
Well,
scenario.
especially Cubans.
You're smoking a cigar, then say, "Okay, Ernie, you're up for your scene." He tosses the cigar away, does a scene,
Okay,
comes
okay.
back, lights up another cigar.
Ah, yes, there we
Yeah,
go. That's the answer.
yeah, that works. That works. But then again, I wouldn't call that smoking a cigar.
Yeah, and
But
you
that's
would never
besides the
relight a
point.
Cuban cigar,
No.
because once it's lit, it's ruined. Which
You
I'm
know,
sure is utterly fascinating to you, Yassi.
no, it's all, it's these these things that you find like not experienced or not explained enough, they actually are, and in one very good visual explanation, and it's the scene that we see Hasselbecker in his old military First World War costume of sort. I'm not saying like uniform, because for him at that point it's a costume, not a uniform. And he sits there and he starts talking about his war and his perception and everything. And I think it's the whole, you know the 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 movie, the plot is not interested mm, in this, you know in depth of the character. It is interested in, or any like personal motivation. We're looking at it completely wrong if we look at it like that. It's because it wants to say war experiences at that period of time and history. If you want to apply historical elements that you were talking about to the film, your experiences with war like forever changes your perception of reality. That's what it's all about.
That's
And
a
all
very
these
important point.
characters, yeah, they're shells of the real people, or shells of the real characters. That's why everything seems so shallow and banal.
So when you say something like you're entirely wrong if you look at it this way, you just can't say things like that in a film discussion room.
Uh, can we let that rest, please?
I I didn't bring it up. We need to have a civilized discourse here, and I'm a comedy expert, so please think about think before you say things like that.
Sorry, I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't know. Did I say anything? I don't know. Offensive? Sorry.
All right.
Well, I'm going to start moving this room to a close because we've, of course, gone longer than the actual movie, and plus, we all know how I feel about really, really long rooms. So I'm just going to go once around and last thoughts on Our Man in Havana. We'll just go in PVR order and hi, Bender.
I just want to again um, make a plea for Last Holiday, which features another wonderful Alec Guinness comedic performance, which the, has some echoes of this and some differences, and it's like 9 years earlier, um, and it would make a nice pairing with Akira, which we saw not too long ago. Also, speaking of Kurosawa, since we did do Rashomon recently, um, you know, this is this has some connections to that too, in the sense of competing views of reality, and that's one of the charms of his film is that the fantasy ends up winning over the reality, or the fantasy overtakes the reality, and that's kind of a little bit of a Rashomon thing. Oh, one other thing, I know this is not a thing about this movie, but while I'm mentioning Rashomon, I just wanted to mention, it occurred to me after we talked, the baby at the end, we were saying the baby comes out of nowhere. And then it occurred to me, one of the consequences potentially of a rape is a baby. So maybe symbolically, the baby is a logical manifestation of that story, with time distortion, because she obviously didn't have a baby right after, the rape. But anyway, just a thought. I will shut up now.
Yeah, that's a very interesting connection to make. Even if it doesn't, even if it is not implied intentionally by Kurosawa, I think the connection could be made. Um, so like I said before, I enjoyed the film. I believe that, as I mentioned to Eric before, I need to slow down in my discussions about films because I just cannot keep up with them. I seriously feel a necessity to rewatch Caravaggio, Thomas More, Ikuru. There are so many, and this film, even though I don't, for me, is not something as interesting as Bergman things are for me, or Almodovar and Thomas More and Caravaggio. To me, this is just it's nice entertainment, very well done, but it's not really what shakes me. But nevertheless, when I hear, especially hi Eric and Yassi, with your different angles and historical and trivia, and I I feel incomplete because I caught maybe 20% of that on the film for many reasons. Because I saw it only once, because I'm not really into cinema on that level, because of many reasons. But that makes the time that I invest into watching a movie and then trying to read about it and then discussing about it conduces me automatically to say, well, now I have to watch it again. Because so much happens in these rooms, at least for me, that I feel I'm not complete unless I say, okay, now I have more layers, then I'm going to go back out and watch it. But then I have to watch another one, and then another one. And you people are too much, and I am too much. So, what to do?
Sila, I hope that you reconsider because uh, I I profoundly benefited from your rooms, especially the Kurosawa rooms, and just the act of getting somebody to watch a movie they otherwise wouldn't watch is by itself really an immense thing. And I think we have wonderful discussions, and you're an invaluable contributor to it. I think that you really underestimate how much you bring to these discussions, and I just I don't think that you need to do more preparation or worry about you not doing enough preparation. I think I mean, there's certain directors you'll pick that I just don't feel aligned with, so I won't go to those series. But I wish you'd reconsider changing your approach because I think what you did was working really well for me, at least. And Eric seemed to have a good time. So I just ask you to think twice about it. I really loved what you were doing with your film rooms.
Well, I appreciate that very, very much. Um, and maybe I should be a little bit more clear. I don't really, I really cannot stop because to me, this is important. And that's why I want to watch the movies again because it is important. And not as a complaint, but as a comparison as to where I stand. When you mentioned a few days ago, uh, give the people what they want, and I don't want to have a discussion, but just to make the comparison so you understand what I'm coming from. This is an intrinsic necessity in me to without insulting anyone. I really don't care what people say about many things. I need to be deep about it. I need to, and the speed with which we watched Bergman last year was for several people. uh, It was not too much, but it was a lot. And most people have a regular job and a regular life, and on top of that, Clubhouse, it's an additional life that we have to carry. And I just know that the work that I did for Almodovar and Bergman, it didn't take anything out of me in terms of I it was too much time. No, I enjoyed doing it, and I think it was necessary to do it. But it is so much, and every time comes more. So to make to close it, at least this aspect, what I am actually seriously considering is just focusing a little bit more, maybe just one film per person because I stick to this birthday system. So maybe one film instead of three or five. I mean, five films is a lot, and one person is born today, and three will be born tomorrow. So it doesn't stop. But I'm not going to stop. I'm just trying to figure out how to be more effective for myself and also more concise so that people don't need to get extra jobs to buy extra time to be able to be in my rooms.
Well, thank you for helping me better understand where you're coming from. I appreciate it.
And I think we're all agreed we need more film rooms on Clubhouse.
I agree with that. More light and heavy, both.
Yazzie, your final thoughts on our man in Havana?
Nothing, it's just that with cartoonish characters, you heighten the absurdity, the farcical beliefs, and yep, and that's it. And Philip Roth, the the critic, the theorician, he says that the satire is all we need for the satire is uh the institution. As long as there is social institutions there and their cultural norms and their belief systems, there's something to be laughed at. It can be funny, it can be heartbreaking, but at the end, what is necessary, I mean, the moral outrage is going to transfer into comedy, into comic art, and that's satire.
That's
An
terrific.
extra
Or
point, an extra point about reality. My son is a man in Havana. He's in Havana right now. So
yeah, and that's the point where reality overlaps this. Like when fantasy overlaps reality, that's also another element of satire.
Hopefully not in the part with the prostitutes and the cocaine.
no, I really find important, for me at least, I find very important how different points were made about the importance of seeing this as the genre that it is. It doesn't matter what we call it, but just to, because if I would have seen the movie, that's what I said a couple of weeks ago. If I don't have the context of comedy in terms of government, in terms of Cuba, in terms of Monty Python, etc., the movement of Alec Baldwin, I'm sorry, yeah, would not be comedic because I don't have the reference point. So once I know what I'm supposed to go by and the references, then I say, wow, yeah, that is a very sharp criticism. Otherwise, I would say, what is he talking about?
And to that point, I'm going to end with a quote from Mr. Greene himself on this exact issue. He said, "The sense of unhappiness is so much easier to convey than that of happiness. In misery, we seem aware of our own existence, even though it may be in the form of monstrous egoism. This pain of mine is individual. This nerve that winces belongs to me and to no other. But happiness annihilates us. We lose our identity." So and that really goes to both what you and Yazzie were both saying, Sila. Scheduling note again, next week and the week after are going to be Sila's suggestions, which it's going to be the 1972 version of Sleuth, starring Michael Caine and Sir Laurence Olivier. So looking forward to both uh, Sila's talent in being able to run the room, and my being able to have a couple of weeks where I can kind of shun those responsibilities. And then we're going to finish off the month. This was a scheduling change with Orson Welles' Chimes at Midnight. The reason why is because it's now become available in a semi decent print so that people can see it. Whereas before, you would have had to have gotten the DVD from Criterion. And I don't know how long this window is going to last, number one. And number two, because when we move to May, when I'm doing 1944 in film, one of the films that we're doing is Laurence Olivier's version of Henry V, which I realized makes absolutely no sense unless you can also discuss Henry IV, which of course Chimes at Midnight is an adaptation of Henry IV, and so but that's going to be our schedule for the rest of the month. And again, we're scheduled all the way through May. So the one thing we did, we took Brighton Rock off the schedule. I rewatched it, and I just don't think it holds up enough to sustain an interesting room.
Well, Eric, you said Chimes of Midnight has a window, but I'm not sure you mentioned where that window is. Where is it currently residing? What platform?
It is on Criterion.
Okay, great.
And
That's all I wanted to know.
but it's also on for I think $2.99 on YouTube right now. The difference is that it's actually a decent print with good sound. That's available out there. Before you could see it but it was a very, very bad version. It had to do with the legal rights to the film being tied up, and it had. It still needs a restoration. It's still not in the best of shape, but we can talk about that when we do that. But you've got 3 weeks. And as usual, if anybody has trouble tracking the film down, back channel me, and I will send you a link to the film that I have for free. I actually have it downloaded on my cell phone right now. That's how easily available the film is. But for how long, I'm not sure, because of course that's the problem with streaming, is they could change their minds next week and it's gone.
I'll watch it right away. Thank you for.
Very good. I appreciate that. Hi, and I appreciate all of you being here and all of our listeners on the Facebook. We appreciate you too, and I don't mention you often enough, but that's actually the majority. It turns out of our audience. We appreciate you as well, and I really want to take a moment to say Yassi stayed for an entire episode, and we love her passion, and we love having our Yazzie back, and we thank you so much. And other than that, I wish you all a good night. Wait, has anybody else got any rooms or anything that they want to promote before I close the room out?
Tonight, in 2 hours, you are more than welcome if you have time. I will be having a short room, as today is Maya Angelou's birthday, so that would be it. Thank you.
Well, other than that, we'll see you next week for Sila's episode on 1972's Sleuth, and I wish you all goodbye. Have a great one. Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.